I never thought I'd find myself in this mess, honestly. Amy and I had been together for 5 years, engaged for almost a year. Things weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. She always had that sharp tongue, that bitchy attitude, but I figured it was just her personality, a little sass, a little attitude, typical Amy. Still, I loved her, or at least I thought I did. We had this big engagement party planned, a celebration of us finally tying the knot. I was nervous but excited, and everyone was telling us how perfect we looked together. That night, everything seemed to go smoothly. Amy was her usual self, bitchy, sarcastic, but charming in her own way. My best man, Jake, was there too, and I trusted him. We've known each other since college. He's practically family. We joked around, danced, and I was feeling pretty good. But I started noticing small things that didn't quite add up, little weird moments. Amy acting tense when she got calls, hurriedly silencing her phone. She was always quick to lie, though, brushing off anything suspicious with a biting comment or a fake laugh. Then came the morning of the wedding. I couldn't sleep. I was lying in bed, half expecting last-minute chaos when I decided to check her purse, something I'd never done before. It was a stupid move, I know, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. I found a hotel key tucked in the small zippered pocket. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just any hotel key. It was to the hotel where Jake stayed when he visited town. I looked closer. The key was slightly worn, used recently, and the room number was one I didn't recognize. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind raced. That hotel was supposed to be for Jake's visits, but here was this key, hidden in Amy's purse. My head was spinning. I kept thinking about all the signs I ignored, her late nights, the way she snapped at me for no reason, her evasive answers when I asked about her phone. All those little moments suddenly made sense in a sick way. She'd been lying all along. She was cheating on me, and I had just found out on the day I was about to say I do. I felt numb, like someone had punched me in the gut. The betrayal hit so hard I couldn't breathe. That's when I knew I couldn't just pretend everything was okay anymore. I had to confront her, face her with the truth. But I wasn't sure what I'd say or how she'd react. I just knew that my perfect wedding day was ruined, and everything I believed in was shattered. I stared at that hotel key for what felt like hours, trying to process the betrayal I had just uncovered. It was a lot to take in, and honestly, I was terrified of what came next. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd learned and everything I'd missed. The hotel key was still in my hand, cold and foreign. I kept thinking about how Amy had lied to me for so long, how she'd been sneaking around behind my back, and how she'd been acting like everything was fine. The worst part was that I had been blind to it all. I thought we were building a future, that she was the one. Turns out, she'd been lying to me right up until the very end. In the early morning, I decided I needed to confront her. I didn't want to let her get away with it or pretend I didn't know. I grabbed the key and waited until she was still asleep, then quietly slipped out of bed, making my way to the bedroom door. My heart was pounding, part anger, part heartbreak. I pulled out my phone to record her if she did anything suspicious, but honestly, I didn't even know if I'd need it. I just needed to see her face, hear her lie to me again if she dared. When Amy finally woke up, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her purse. She looked annoyed, like I was interrupting her precious sleep. "What are you doing?" she snapped, her voice still raspy from sleep. I looked her straight in the eyes, my voice cold and steady. "I found this." I held up the hotel room key. Her eyes flickered and her mouth went tight. That's when I saw the flicker of guilt, or maybe defiance. Whatever it was enough to push me further. She tried to brush it off, of course. "It's nothing, just a mistake," she said, her tone bitchy. "I was going to tell you, really, I was going to tell you. That hotel is for a work thing, it's nothing, you're just overreacting." I wasn't buying it, not for a second. I asked her outright, "Are you sleeping with Jake?" Her eyes widened and she scoffed. "You're crazy. Jake and I, that's disgusting, you're just paranoid." But I saw the lies in her eyes. I knew better. I pressed her further, demanding the truth, and she got defensive. She started throwing out accusations of my jealousy, saying I was insecure, that I didn't trust her. But I wasn't a fool. I knew the truth was right there, staring me in the face. I had always suspected she was cheating, but now I had proof. That hotel key, her evasive answers, her bitchy attitude when I questioned her, they all added up. I was furious, devastated, and yet somehow relieved that I finally knew what was really going on. The showdown didn't last long. She kept lying, spitting out excuses about how she needed space, how she was confused, how she loved me but wasn't in love anymore. It was all the same. Old bullshit. I could see she was trying to manipulate me, to turn me into the bad guy, but I wasn't falling for it. I told her I was done, that I didn't want to be with someone who lied to my face, especially not on the day of my wedding. She stormed out of the room, throwing her bitchy little remarks over her shoulder, saying I was overreacting, that I was crazy, that she never meant to hurt me. That moment was a turning point. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak that I'd never experienced before. The woman I loved, the woman I was supposed to marry, had been cheating on me with Jake, my best man, for who knows how long. The betrayal cut deep, and I realized I was done pretending everything was fine. I couldn't fix this. She'd already broken it beyond repair. As she left, I sat there, shaking, trying to process what my life was about to become. I knew from that point on, everything would change. I just didn't know how much worse it could get. After she stormed out, I just sat there for a while, trying to breathe. My mind was racing. All the plans, the dreams of a future with Amy, they all felt like a joke now. I kept replaying her lies, her bitchy smirk, and the way she threw her excuses around like they meant something. I was furious, more than I'd ever been in my life. How could she do this? How long had she been lying to me? And Jake, my best friend, how could he do this? I trusted him, I loved him like family, and now I was questioning everything about both of them. I got up slowly, feeling numb. I knew I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I decided I had to find out how deep this really went, whether they'd been doing this for weeks, months, or longer. I slipped my phone out and started scrolling through her messages, her social media, anything that could tell me more. I needed to confirm what I already suspected. This was not a one-time thing. It was ongoing, probably started around the same time I proposed or maybe even before that. The thought made me sick. Then I remembered her phone. She always kept it close, but I knew her passcode. I hesitated for a second, then unlocked it. The first thing I saw was a recent text conversation with Jake. The messages were full of flirtatious comments, inside jokes, plans to meet up. They didn't even bother hiding it anymore. I saw her mention a hotel more than once, saying she couldn't wait to see him again. It was proof enough. My stomach twisted in knots, but I also felt a strange burst of clarity. I had to do something. I decided to confront Jake next. I couldn't just let this slide. The betrayal felt like a punch to the gut, but I also knew I had to face him head-on. I waited until later that evening when I saw him at the bar with some friends. I pulled him aside, quiet but furious, and showed him the messages. His face went pale, and for the first time I saw real guilt in his eyes. He stammered, said some half-assed excuse about getting caught up in the moment and not meaning to hurt me. Yeah, right. That was the moment I realized the full scope of what had happened. Jake, my best man, had been screwing my fiancée, Amy, behind my back, and Amy. She'd been lying to my face for who knows how long, acting like everything was fine while she was cheating and sneaking around. That realization hit like a freight train, and I felt every ounce of anger and heartbreak flood over me all at once. I thought I was going to be sick. I was so pissed I could scream, but I just told them both to get away from me. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. That night, I barely slept. All I could hear in my mind was her bitchy voice, her lies, and the image of Jake smirking when I showed him the messages. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. I'd always trusted them, always believed in the friendship, the love, whatever you want to call it. Now I saw the truth. They'd been lying to me from the start, using my trust as a fucking game. The betrayal was so deep I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. I felt like a fool, like I'd been played for a sucker. The most brutal part was realizing I'd been sleeping next to her every night, sharing a bed while she was cheating on me. How long had she been lying next to me, pretending everything was perfect? Did she even feel guilty about it? I doubted it. That bitch had no remorse. She was manipulative, bitchy, and she knew exactly how to lie her way out of everything. I hated her for it. I hated Jake even more, but mostly I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. This betrayal changed everything, and I knew I'd never look at either of them the same way again. The next day was a blur. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding and I couldn't get her face out of my mind. Her bitchy smirk, her lies, the way she thought she could just sweep everything under the rug. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and utter despair. I kept asking myself how I let it get this far. How could I have been so blind? I had trusted her with everything, and she'd thrown it all away for some cheap sex with Jake. My best friend. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. The first step was getting rid of her stuff. I didn't want her in my house anymore. I packed her bags, feeling every piece of her betrayal as I did it. I threw her clothes, her makeup, everything into a box. I wasn't trying to be cruel. Well, maybe a little, but I just couldn't handle her being there anymore. It was like every corner of the apartment reminded me of her lies. I told her to leave, to never come back. She tried to argue, of course, acting all hurt and bitchy, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her feelings anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life. Once she was gone, I sat alone in the silence, trying to process what had just happened. I couldn't believe I'd been so stupid. How had I missed all the signs? How had I been sleeping next to her, trusting her, while she was out screwing Jake? It felt like everything in my life had been a lie. I kept thinking about the times she'd snapped at me or lied about where she was. Was any of it real, or was I just a fool who loved a bitchy woman who only cared about herself? The thought made me sick. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I kept going over what I knew, what I'd seen. I decided I needed closure, a way to put this all behind me. I reached out to Jake, knowing I'd never forgive him, but I had to hear it straight from the source. I messaged him, telling him I knew everything. His response was full of excuses, more bullshit about bad decisions and being caught up in the moment. I told him I never wanted to see him again, that he was dead to me. That was the truth. I didn't want anything to do with either of them anymore. The emotional toll was unbearable. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and such deep sadness I thought I'd drown in it. How could someone I trusted so much turn out to be this cruel? How could Amy, who I thought loved me, lie and cheat like that? I kept asking myself those questions, but I didn't have answers. All I knew was that I was done. Done with the lies, the betrayal, the false smiles. I needed to start over, even if it meant feeling broken for a while. That night I made a promise to myself. I would rebuild my life without her or Jake. I'd learn to trust again someday, but not now. Not after this. The pain was real, but so was the anger. And honestly, I felt more alive now than I had in weeks, maybe longer, because for the first time I was finally free from their bullshit. I knew I'd survive this, even if it felt like my world was falling apart. And I knew one thing for sure: I'd never let anyone lie to me or betray me like this again. The weeks that followed were the hardest I've ever experienced. At first, I kept replaying everything in my mind, every lie, every sneaky moment, every time I ignored the signs. My apartment, once full of hope and plans for our future, now felt cold and empty. I couldn't escape the feeling that I'd been a fool, that I'd never really known the woman I loved. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let her or Jake keep messing with my head. I had to take control of my life again. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the pain. But even then, I'd sometimes catch myself staring at the door, waiting for some kind of apology or explanation that would never come. I kept wondering if she ever felt guilty, if she ever looked in the mirror and saw the damage she'd done. I'd catch myself thinking about all the what-ifs. What if I had seen the signs sooner? What if I had never trusted her? Those thoughts haunted me for a while. It was like I'd lost a part of myself and I didn't know how to get it back. One day, I decided I needed to confront my feelings head-on. I started writing everything down, everything I felt about her, about Jake, about the betrayal. It was a messy, angry, heartbreaking process, but it helped me start to make sense of it all. I realized I was angry not just at her, but also at myself for letting this happen. I had trusted her blindly, and I'd let myself get blindsided. That wasn't entirely her fault, I guess, but it still hurt like hell. I knew I had to forgive myself first if I ever wanted to move on. I also reached out to some old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years. I needed support, even if I was ashamed of what had happened. Surprisingly, some of them listened without judgment. They didn't try to minimize what I was feeling or tell me to forget about her. They just let me vent. Slowly, I started to see that I wasn't alone. There were people who genuinely cared, who wanted to see me get past this and find happiness again. That realization was a small comfort, but it mattered. It was the beginning of rebuilding my confidence, piece by piece. Eventually, I made the decision to get rid of everything that reminded me of her. Her clothes, her things, even photos of us together. I couldn't keep living in the past, clinging to memories of a relationship that was built on lies. It was time to cut ties completely. I knew I wouldn't forget what happened, but I could learn from it. I had to accept that she was gone, that Jake was gone, and that I deserved better than betrayal and lies. I promised myself I would. Let this define me, even if it hurt like hell to let go. Now I'm slowly trying to piece my life back together. It's not easy, and I still have days where I feel empty and betrayed. But I know I'm stronger than this, and I refuse to let her or Jake ruin my future. I've learned that trust is fragile, and when it's broken, it's almost impossible to repair. But I've also learned that I don't have to stay broken forever. One day, I'll find someone who values me, who treats me with honesty and respect. Until then, I'll just keep moving forward, one step at a time, trying to rebuild the pieces of myself that they shattered. Looking back, I realize just how much this whole experience has changed me. At first, I was shattered, completely broken by the betrayal, the lies, the feeling that I had been played for a fool. But over time, I started to see it as a harsh lesson. One I wish I hadn't had to learn the hard way, but a lesson nonetheless. I learned that trust isn't something to take lightly, and that some people will betray you just when you think you found your person. That's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it's made me tougher. Now I can honestly say I'm healing, not because I've forgotten, but because I've learned to accept what happened and let it go. I've grown tired of the bitterness and anger. Those feelings only kept me stuck. Instead, I focus on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I know I'll never forget the betrayal, but I also know I won't let it define me. I've realized that my happiness isn't dependent on someone else's lies. It's about taking control of my own story again. I want anyone reading this to know that no matter how bad it hurts at first, you can get through it. You can come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Trust is fragile, and when it's broken, it's hard to rebuild. But it's possible. You just have to be willing to face the pain, let yourself feel it without shame, and then choose to move forward. Sometimes that means walking away from people you once loved, even if it hurts like hell. Sometimes it means starting over from scratch. So here I am, finally at a point where I can breathe again. I still have scars, but they're fading. I still have wounds, but I'm healing. And I know that someday I'll find happiness again, maybe even with someone who deserves my trust. Until then, I'll keep living, keep learning, and most importantly, keep trusting myself to make better choices. Betrayal will always hurt, but it also taught me that I am stronger than I thought. And that's enough to keep going.